Welcome to the Geek Legion of Doom, and we are going to be talking a little different type of geek programming today. Yes, we're talking Beauty and the Geek. Now, in case you are unawares, this is a kind of reality TV show that is billed as a kind of social experiment, actually engineered by actor Ashton Kutcher, I believe, in the early 2000s. And it's had a few different iterations across the globe. Now, I've actually watched one season each of the Australian one, which I think was the season 7, which is 2021. And that was the most recent season, the UK version of it, and a season from America, season 3, I believe, from America. And I've watched a few episodes here and there as well. So I'm going to be talking about the show overall, how the kind of different countries compare, and also how it kind of portrays geekdom and people within it, and just give you a kind of a general overview on my thoughts on the TV show. Is it worth watching? Now, before we kind of get into that, let's talk about reality TV. And I always use that phrase in air quotes because, let's be honest, these things aren't a real reflection of reality nor the people in it. So let me give you some context about what I mean. So I'm sure most of you would probably guess that these things are kind of not 100% kind of real. I actually have worked in the storage industry before, and there's a show called Storage Hunters. I think there's a couple of different ones where people going to go in and they bid on kind of lockers and things that, you know, people have defaulted payments on and win. So having worked in the industry, I can tell you that these kind of, how it's presented is not how it works in real life. You know, on the show, for example, they'll cut the lock, they'll open this locker and bid on something without ever looking at it. I can tell you, for example, that you're legally obliged to have to go into the unit as the kind of like the producers of the show or the owners of the kind of the the storage place, to remove any kind of like data protection, anything that would be considered kind of like, you know, unsolicited, illegal, that sort of thing. So when we see these people cutting the locks and things like this, you know, having a look for the first time, they've already been open, they've already been kind of gone through, and even so much so that as I understand it, things are kind of put in there to make it more interesting. So, you know, bear that in mind. So what we see as a reality TV show is not always kind of going to be 100% real. I think there are elements that are real, and we'll talk about it as it relates to kind of Beauty and the Geek. So what's the general premise of Beauty and the Geek? So the general premise is the same on all three versions, Australia, the UK and the US, although their execution is a little different. But we have a group of kind of geeky males who are, you know, maybe have a lacking in social skills and things like this. And the idea for them is to try and be influenced by these kind of beauties, so to speak, to open up, be more kind of confident, things like this. And with the kind of the beauties, the women, the idea is that they use, from the men, they kind of try and use things other than their looks and things like this. That's the idea. Now, obviously, the show is positioned to try and create drama, even to try and have a little bit of kind of romance, and we'll talk about some of the kind of things that I think are set up in the show a little bit later on. But essentially we start with these two groups, and they whittle down to a winner, and the winning kind of like pair would win a bunch of money, and they have to go through various kind of challenges that will kind of take them out of their comfort zone. For example, you know, the geeks will have to try and go on a speed dating, for example, or try and get, you know, phone numbers and things like this, or they'll have to try, the women will try and do things that are kind of more sort of scientific and studious and things like that, and essentially it kind of whittles down to just the kind of the two remaining kind of people who win the prize, and they're kind of paired up. There are differences between, I think, the way these shows are set up. The English and the US shows, and I haven't seen the entire, you know, run of the US show, so I can only kind of comment on the season that I watched and the kind of the few episodes I've seen from other ones. But the US and the UK ones are relatively kind of similar. The Australian one is a little different. So let me kind of go through the kind of the setups and stuff. So the American one, which is the one that started it, obviously. It's the kind of the most glitzy in some ways, and I think the key difference is with that one is there's more extremes in regards to the kind of the people that go in there. So the guys that we get in there are extremely kind of like, I mean, they're made out to be like this, the most awkward kind of socially inept kind of super nerdy people that you'd possibly imagine, and all the kind of the girls are like super kind of attractive and things like this, and you know, like model looking, that sort of thing, but extraordinarily dumb a lot of the time. So the vast majority of the women in the American version seem incredibly stupid, and the men seem incredibly intelligent. In the UK version, it's quite similar, but I would say it's slightly aged up. It's a little bit older, and they're not quite as extreme. They are obviously like attractive women, but they sort of seem like the women who would go out and you would see in a kind of like a nightclub and things like this. And the guys, I don't think seem quite as extreme as the kind of the American counterpart. Now there has only ever been one season, so on the UK version, so we can only kind of judge it on that. But the way the actual seasons work and their mechanics, the challenges, getting voting people out, are very, very identical. The Australian one is a little different. And again, I've only seen the one season of the Australian one, so because all I can judge on. But they seem to be, the contestants seem to be a lot younger, and the definition of geek is a little different here, I think. They have people who are just into geeky things rather than kind of being particularly kind of intelligent. So we've got, for example, in the season 7, which is the one I watched, we've got a guy who's like really into wrestling, for example. We've got another guy who's like, you know, he's just kind of like, I don't know, into cosplay, and there's not really that kind of like level of intelligence necessarily. They don't seem to be like massively studious nerds and things. They just seem to be into sort of geeky things, and nor do the girls seem quite as, they don't seem as dumb as some of the other ones, to be honest, certainly from the American show. And even some of the girls do have some geeky kind of traits. There's one girl on the beauty side who has played Dungeons and Dragons, for example. So I feel the kind of the gap in the Australian one is a lot narrower. So, you know, it's a little easier for them to go, and also they're a lot younger. The other thing with the Australian one as well is that it's edited a lot differently. So having watched the Australian one, you know, it's obviously, they filmed the show and then edited it back, really focusing on the kind of the people that would end up going more of a distance. For example, we have, I think it's like five guys and 5 girls, and there's like one like couple that you barely see in the show, because they get kind of voted out quite early, so they just don't bother even kind of showing you a lot of them in the actual kind of the first few episodes, where we see everyone before anyone gets kind of voted out. And they obviously focus on the people who are going forward quite a lot, you know, and towards the end. So you kind of know who's going to be the ones that are standing and left at the end there. Whilst I think the UK and the US shows do a better job of kind of really giving everyone an equal amount of kind of like screen time through the kind of the season as you. So you don't really know necessarily who's like kind of the obvious choice to get kind of voted out. Now let's talk about kind of like realism and kind of how real is it, you know. So for example, and I'm going to use the Australian one for this, because this is the most recent one. This was 2021, and this gives you an idea of kind of like the real kind of like contestants here. So having watched that particular season, I did a little bit of research, and like for example, we have this one particular guy who is you know, he comes in and he's got this kind of big beard, he's got this big sort of mess of hair, and then they have this makeover, and he's so attractive, really. But you can tell, and I think this is true of all of the shows, that when the producers have obviously found some guys that are into geeky stuff, but are actually, you know, better looking, but they've kind of like geeked them up beforehand. There's one particular guy who's the guy's name escapes me. Before he entered the Geek, Beauty and the Geek challenge, he actually looked pretty much like he did after his makeover. And he actually was even an actor and has dated like an actress. And then you see him before the show, and you kind of look, he's kind of like pretty kind of cool. He's quite well built, he's quite muscular, he's quite athletic. You know, he looked kind of the same as he did after the makeover. And then when you see him come in the intro, he's got this big beard and this big kind of shaggy hair. And it's all such a surprise when he kind of has this makeover, and he looks quite attractive and what have you. And he kind of looks similar to what he did before he even joined the show. And it's like, oh, what a surprise. They've obviously, looked for people who they want to have this kind of reveal and maybe spark romance and stuff. There are other guys that obviously clearly are a lot more geeky. And I'm not saying this guy was a plant necessarily, he's not into the geeky things that he says he's into, but I think there is definitely the producers of, and you see it in every one. There's ones here that they look for. He's actually quite attractive. It's like that, that stereotype where you see in the films where you have a teenage girl who's got a ponytail and glasses, and they take their hair out and let their hair down, and all of a sudden they're super attractive. It's the male equivalent of that, but I think they kind of make these guys look more geeky, or some of them anyway, for when they go into the makeovers look that much different, things like this. So this is what I mean when we kind of say, I think the reality here is a little bit skewed, so don't be kind of too sort of sucked into it. Now, one thing I would say the Australian does differently is it doesn't create as much drama between our kind of characters. The difference with the Australian and versus the British and American ones is, in the American and UK ones, the contestants have to nominate people to get voted out, which then creates, or at least this is how it appears to us on screen. Again, how real it is, we don't know. But they have to nominate people to get evicted. And that then creates rivalries, revenge, drama basically, which is what the show kind of wants. Whilst in the Australian one, no one votes anyone out. They just kind of have to do these challenges, and the presenter kind of chooses who gets kind of knocked out. So there's never that level of animosity in these kind of groups of people. And I think the other thing with the Australian one as well is they don't seem to be quite as paired up. Like, for example, the UK and the American one, they actually have to kind of share a room with the other member of their sex. They all get paired up. So you get one geeky guy, one girl, and they have to go off together and kind of sleep in the same room and stuff. Whilst in the Australian one, everyone's kind of there's a girls' dorm and a boys' dorm. So I don't feel you don't get quite as much interaction with the with the kind of the couples and things like that. So I don't really feel like there was enough of a real sort of partnership between the kind of the couples there. Now there's obviously romance that blossoms on these things, but how well developed it is, I have to question. So is it entertaining? It is entertaining in a way. Now, if this was an experiment that was 100% kind of not set up at all, I actually wonder how much damage this might do to fragile psyches. Because if we do have a kind of bunch of genuine kind of geeks who have real problems with social situations and stuff like that, and you're pairing them with these kind of these super attractive women, and these women they're competitive. There's a cash prize at the end of the day, and they kind of want to progress in the kind of the competition. So there's a degree of having to kind of try and make your couple the best. And I wonder if these kind of these nerdy people who maybe aren't the best of the kind of socially will kind of get super attached to these kind of women, for them only to go, well, it's just in the competition. I was just kind of doing what I had to do to kind of go further on in the competition. And I can imagine it being somewhat kind of difficult for some people, having this promise of being close to this super attractive woman, which they're clearly going to be attracted to, and for the woman to be more transactional, more, it's just kind of a competition, whilst the guys are kind of because they don't have the kind of quite as control on their emotions. I can see it being a little damaging, if I'm completely honest. I'm sure there's friendships that are made out genuinely this. Again, how real this is, we don't know for sure. But yeah, I have some reservations about, could it really put someone back rather than kind of bringing out their confidence, if we were to really think these people are legitimately this kind of socially awkward in reality. I think there's a danger that this could actually be more harm than good in some instances. I'm sure it helps some, but not for others. But it is a fun show, seeing people come out their element, watching these kind of awkward guys. And it's obviously, as a channel called Geek Legion of Doom, I have, I kind of relate to a geek. I mean, it's watching these, you think, well, there's certainly lots of kind of different types of kind of what can be considered geeky, down to kind of, are you into particular pop culture, or are you kind of just super intelligent, or things like this, or you're just kind of socially awkward. I mean, some of these people come across like they have special needs, if I'm completely honest. So it's an entertaining show. It's kind of entertaining, I think, but you can't get sucked into the kind of the log line of how real it actually is. I don't think it's particularly kind of real. I think it's just probably somewhat staged, and people are kind of somewhat either exaggerated, or or even kind of like made to kind of look worse than they actually are. And I think some of these people have been prepped a little more than others, because there's always kind of, in every kind of season I've watched, there's always these guys that are clearly better looking, for example, and clearly physically kind of more attractive than some of the others. So it's okay to watch, but I think the problem sometimes with the reality TV show in general is people think of it as how people act in reality, which I don't think it really is. There are some challenges that are fun to watch, though. So it is entertaining if you're kind of into that sort of thing. I don't know if it's obviously for everyone here, but I thought I'd give my thoughts on it. I actually prefer the British one the best. Now, it's only ever had one season. I like the British one because I thought, I mean, maybe because I'm biased because I am British, but to me, the people in that show seem the least exaggerated. And they're also a little older than the other two. The other two shows. I mean, the Australian one, I would say the average age is probably about 23. The American one's probably about 25. And then the UK ones, they're probably more like 30, 29, 30, that kind of age. But so the people there seemed a little bit more kind of just normal, if that makes sense. They don't seem quite as extreme. Whilst in the US version, they're sort of very extreme. The Australian version, I felt they were almost the opposite. They were kind of like, I don't know if these people are really that kind of socially awkward, or intelligent, or even not intelligent. They just seem kind of on the other side of the spectrum in regards to the geeky kind of trendy, but not miles apart, at least some of them. So the UK one was my favourite, but that only went one season, so I'm assuming that was not particularly popular. The Australian one is the only one that I think is still going, with a new season coming out probably, I assume, this year. So, I mean, does that sound like something you would watch? Has anyone watched it, and what are their thoughts? That was my thoughts on it. Please let me know what you think, and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.